Welcome again, everyone. I'm Brother David Paul, the director of the Benedictine Institute here at St. John's, and I want to welcome you to our first Lunch and Learn of 2016-2017. The Institute has started a new initiative this year. You may have seen that on one of the previous slides. Over the next 4 years, so it's longevity, we're talking time here, we wanted to reframe the conversation just a little bit around Benedictine values. And instead of talking about what we value, we'd like to turn the focus to the other end of the spectrum, to what it is that we do. What do Benedictines do daily, if not many times a day, that effectively and over time has this Benedictine character to it. So we thought that we would focus on just a few of those practices this year. And to start off, we thought we would start with hospitality. Probably one of the most important practices in the Rule of Benedict. It assumes many things. It assumes the presence of an other. It assumes the presence of strangers who come to you. It relies on a whole frame of mind that keeps you open to receive that stranger as though they were Christ himself. It just has a whole connection to many other practices as you are attempting to be open and welcoming to all, including Christ himself. So, we thought our featured speaker for today is no stranger to Benedictine hospitality, having worked in the monastery and college food service at St. Ben's for 18 years, and as a member of the monastery leadership team for 14 years, and now the hospitality coordinator for St. Benedict's Monastery. Sister Cecelia Prokosch joined the monastery when it was celebrating its 100th anniversary and has been professed now for 57 years. If she doesn't know something about Benedictine hospitality by now, we should probably take it off the list of Benedictine practices. So please help me welcome Sister Cecelia Prokosch.
I have a little step stool to be a little. I said, I think I'm going to stand on a chair. That podium seems so large. And I think they thought that wouldn't be such a good idea. Well, you've probably covered all the topic already. We could just kind of close the books. Well, I'm honored to be asked to do this. It's always interesting to try to put into words things that are in your heart and mind, and you never really have had to articulate it. But anyway, I'm going to give it a try. Yes, I am the hospitality coordinator at St. Benedict's now, but that's mostly field trips and tours and things like that. It isn't giving talks to groups of 100 people. But thank you all for coming. Just to start, today's culture is increasingly hostile and suspicious toward anyone who appears to be different, especially when tragedy strikes. Our instinct is to bolt our doors, protect the ones we love. But deep within the heart of Benedictine spirituality lies a remedy to hatred, fear, and suspicion. And that is hospitality. This is a quote from the cover of Homan and Pratt's Radical Hospitality, not from the newspaper today, but from 2002. But I want to say Patty Wetterling on September 25th gave us an example of that remedy of hospitality by saying, every prayer, every candle lit, every flower, every porch light lit, every hug, every kind word, each and every one of you has provided us with the courage to move forward. I received this email that a writer described as the first important lesson in how to treat people. She shared this story. During my second month of college, our professor gave us a pop quiz. I was a conscientious student and breezed my way through the questions until I read the last one. What is the first name of the woman who cleans the school? Surely this is some kind of joke, I thought. I had seen the cleaning woman several times. She was tall, dark-haired, in her 50s, but how would I know her name? I handed in my paper, leaving the last question blank. Just before class ended, one student asked if the last question would count toward our grade. Absolutely, said the professor. In your careers, you will meet many people. All are significant. They deserve your attention and care, even if all you do is smile and say hello. Hospitality could mean graciousness, even common courtesies. My sister-in-law tells this story. She was having to move her mother to a nursing home to get the care that she needed. And she said, you know, it will help if when you need someone to do something for you, if you say please. And then when they have done something for you, to say thank you. And her mother said, do you mean every time? Many people who visit St. Benedict's Monastery leave expressing gratitude for the peace they find there, for the hospitality, for their feeling at home. But Gail from Vermont spent a couple days in a hermitage, and when she was getting ready to leave, she thanked for the order she found there. She said, when I go home and remember you, I will think of you, my sisters who pray and love each other, and I thank God for the order I found there. Well, I was thinking more about what order might mean. It could mean the regular schedule. It could also mean letting people know our plans for the day. It could mean showing up at the time we said we'd show up. It could mean keeping a good balance in life, time for oneself, time for prayer, time for work, time for fun, time for leisure, taking time to be leisurely at meals, for example. This is a kind of hospitality to oneself. This is as important as extending hospitality to others. A group of third graders visited our monastery. Sister Lisa had revised a noon prayer and had it in the oratory without the sisters being there. One boy was sitting next to his teacher, and that may tell you something right there. After the prayer, the teacher told me that at one point this little boy said to her, "It's so beautiful in here, I don't think I can be naughty." So maybe beauty is another element of hospitality. Verna Holyhead, a Good Samaritan sister, in her book, The Gift of St. Benedict, says this: the hospitality Benedict teaches is not a social event, but a holy event. It is costly, not always in terms of money, but in the demands it makes on our hearts, on our time, on our personal resources. In each of us, there is some inner homelessness, some alienation from ourselves and one another that longs for a welcome. Benedict asks that we become a shelter for one another, accepting each other with our personality, our gifts, our physical resources. Not to extend such a welcome is to remain strangers. Sister Verna continues, hospitality begins in small ways with people of easy approachability, with warmth rather than polite boredom, with friendly words rather than officiousness, with graciousness rather than rudeness, in any of the numerous meetings and community affairs. For me, offering hospitality often gives gifts to me, too. If I'm with someone at the Liturgy of the Hours, finding pages, etc., the words of the Psalms take on a whole new meaning and strength. Part of it is hearing the words as the guest may be hearing them. One time, a young Presbyterian minister was with me at morning prayer. We prayed Psalm 51. I've prayed that many times. I know it is about repentance and pleading with God. But this time, 2 verses struck me as though they had never been there before. You love those centered in truth. And again, fill me with happy songs. Neither one of them had ever been there before. Jane Tomaine, in her book, St. Benedict's Toolbox, says this: the truth is that we can be manipulative and self-serving. We disregard one another's viewpoint. We consider others as annoyances that must be dealt with. We fail to see need around us. We close our fists and hold in our love. In short, we become self-protective and in the process miserable. So respect, care, absence of judgment, encouragement, welcome, friendliness, ministering to the needs of others are all part of Benedictine hospitality. Benedict instructs us, the abbot or prioress, and the whole community is to wash the feet of all guests. One of our sisters tells a story of her niece, or maybe it was a grandniece, married here in the Abbey Church. At the end of the ceremony or the Mass, they asked their guests to sing the Servant Song by Richard Gallard. You know it. Let me be your servant. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey. We are partners on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. I will hold the Christ light for you. In the nighttime of your fear, I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. Will you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. And while the congregation is singing this servant song, the bride and the groom sat down and washed each other's feet. A wonderful way to exercise hospitality to one another and to celebrate their new relationship and commitment. I remember her telling me that after the service, I think she had made her own dress and she had made the bridesmaids' dresses and whatever, but at the end of the service, when they were leaving the church, they skipped out hand in hand, so, with sort of a non-conventional wedding. So we don't often have the opportunity to literally wash someone's feet, but figuratively, how might we wash someone's feet? I'm reminded of a story a woman in St. Joseph told me. New neighbors of another nationality had moved in next door. There were several children, and the children began making a nuisance of themselves by going door to door, asking for cookies, asking to come in and visit. This woman, I'll call her Dolores, could see the writing on the wall. The neighbors began talking, and they began thinking about calling social services. So Dolores took it upon herself to go over to visit with the mother. And she learned that the mother felt kind of overwhelmed. Husband was working long hours. So Dolores continued to visit her regularly and literally began sharing with her some parenting skills. She got the neighbors to go together to build a sandbox and swings, and it made a big difference in the neighborhood. That, I think, is welcoming the stranger, definitely being hospitable. Benedict, did not come up with the idea of hospitality. Rather, we'll find examples of hospitality in the Hebrew scripture and in the teachings of Jesus. Think of 3 visitors to Sarah and Abraham. Think of the book of Ruth, of Job opening his door to a stranger. And in the New Testament, think of the gospel with Martha and Mary welcoming Jesus to their home. It was just the gospel yesterday, I think. Think of the story of the prodigal son or the prodigal father, of Jesus insisting on feeding the multitudes, to mention just a few. As was mentioned in the flyer that went out, the word hospitality as such doesn't appear in our English translations of the Rule of Benedict, but Benedict does address issues around guests in 6 chapters of the Rule. Chapter 31, Qualifications of the Monastery Cellarer. 42, Silence after Compline. 53, probably the most familiar to us, the reception of guests. 56, the abbot's or the prioress's table. 58, the procedure for receiving brothers or sisters. And finally, the porter or the portress of the monastery. To the cellarer, Benedict says, show every care and concern for guests and for the poor. About silence after compline, keep it strictly, except when guests require attention. And chapter 53, all guests are to be welcomed as Christ. The superior and sisters meet the guest with all the courtesy of love, pray with them, offer the kiss of peace. Then the superior or sister sit with them, read the divine law, and after, every kindness is to be shown to the guest. And the superior may break the fast with guests, pour water on the hands of the guests, the entire community, wash the feet of the guests. Great care and concern is to be shown in receiving poor people and pilgrims, because in them Christ is received. A separate kitchen is provided, and the superior is to eat with them. Adequate bedding for the guest quarters. When meeting a guest, ask for a blessing. New members stay in the guest quarters before being received. And finally, to the porter or the portress of the monastery, as soon as anyone knocks or a poor man calls out, the reply is, "Thanks be to God," and "Your blessing, please." Then, with all gentleness, provide a prompt answer with the warmth of love. Jessica Robleski defines hospitality as that willingness to extend unquestioning welcome to the stranger. But as the title of her book suggests, the title is The Limits of Hospitality, she soon realizes that there are other virtues and conditions that are necessary to sustain the practice of hospitality over time and in diverse circumstances. Whether such places are the possessions of families, your homes and households, churches, communities of charity, educational institution, or even nation states. She speaks of the 5 pairs of spiritual disciplines that are relevant to hospitality. They include prayer of word and prayer of silence. Prayer of word may be expressions of thanksgiving, intentions, intercessions, Whereas prayer of silence or silent contemplation, a person doesn't necessarily do anything, but rather seeks primarily to make herself available and attentive to God, with empty hands, vulnerable, useless, without much to show, prove, or defend. A second set of spiritual disciplines, solitude and fellowship. The practice of true hospitality requires not only that we ourselves become quiet cells where God can dwell, this is Nouwen's idea, in our solitude, but also that we learn to find Christ in every stranger and his Spirit in every gathering of strangers or friends. Fasting and celebration. We ordinarily think of fasting involving abstinence from food or sometimes even drink, but we can also fast from a cell phone or television or alcoholic beverages or a Facebook account. Fasting from these can open time for hospitality. Not all hospitality is celebratory, but if I invite someone in with a smile or a sense of joy, this is the best side of hospitality. Humor, joy, laughing or smiling, decorations, food, drink, of course not required, but is a way to honor a guest or a stranger. The fourth pair, service and rest. Service is probably the practice most obviously connected to hospitality. This usually is probably a small, insignificant things. I think of Dr. Hinton. She had been inaugurated as the president of CSB, and it was the alum weekend. And I was in Goreski, and I had eaten with a group of people and carrying my plates over to the dishwashing area. And she met me, and she said, "Oh, may I take your plate?" I said, "Oh, no, thank you very much, but no." She just stared at me. She said, "Have you heard of servant leadership?" I let her take my plates. And I went over and got dessert and sat with someone else. But honestly, the more she's at St. Benedict's, the more you know she has imbibed every sense of hospitality and every other Benedictine value. But the other side of service is that of rest, meaning not only taking a step back from our work, but also learning to be graceful recipient of the service of others. We've sort of come to see being busy as synonymous with being important. But rest, Sabbath keeping, and afternoon tea can actually invigorate energy and inspire further service. And the final pair of spiritual disciplines that are relevant to hospitality, confession and forgiveness. Hospitality requires us to admit mistakes, faults, and failings, and even simply to ask for advice from others. That is, seek the wisdom of others. Ongoing forgiveness is a necessary part of all significant and enduring relationships, whether they be families, friendships, professional colleagues, partners. Again, Wroblewski, in her book, The Limits of Hospitality, also suggests that hospitality is not total openness, which would deny the integrity of the household and therefore the safety and the significance of the welcome, but rather a balance between a generous openness and the safety of boundaries. One image she finds helpful in thinking about relationships between the limits and the spirit of hospitality is that of an inflated latex balloon. Without the balloon itself, which sets the limits, there is only undifferentiated air. And yet, without the air that is breathed into it, a balloon is merely a flat and lifeless piece of latex. Continuing that image, she suggests that if the balloon is filled too rapidly, it will pop, And yet what appears to be a tiny piece of latex has tremendous potential for expansion if it is gradually stretched and filled with air. This does not mean it can expand infinitely, but it does mean that a disciplined stretching can lead to the gradual expansion of human limits and capacity for hospitality. In Richard Rohr's daily meditations from the Desert Fathers and Mothers, he reminds us, love lives and thrives in our heart space when we are praying for someone. We are holding them in our heart space. When a resentment, negativity, or irritation comes into our mind, move that thought or person literally into your heart space. Dualistic commentaries are lodged in our head, but in our heart it is surrounded with blood, which will often feel warm like coals. In this space, it is almost impossible to comment, judge, create storylines, or remain antagonistic. So what does it mean to be hospitable? I always think the real meaning has to do with what Jane Tomain again describes as making room inside ourselves for another person. This is from her book, St. Benedict's Toolbox. So in conclusion, I think hospitality is not so much a single virtue or action, but a way of life. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you again for coming. You're so attentive.
We just have a couple quick announcements before you all have to dash off. Sister Anne-Marie, I think, yep. Next month, or actually no, later this month, our next Lunch and Learn is going to feature artist and potter in residence, Richard Bresnahan, who will speak about the Benedictine practice of stewardship, for which Richard is really well known here on this campus and internationally. The title of that talk will be From Ancient Fire to a Humane Future. And look for the notice of that within the next week or so, within a week here, I think, from a couple days, Chick says.
Okay, I think I don't need that here. I'd like to give you an opportunity to consider participating in what we call the School of Benedictine Spirituality, in which we offer 4 courses, kind of expanding on some of the areas that Cecelia talked about. The courses we offer in the school are Psalms and Liturgy of the Hours, Spirituality of the Benedictine Tradition, Living the Benedictine Values, so you get an expanded view of them, and Lectio. If you're interested in more information on it, I have some brochures and schedules at the table as you leave the room. Any questions, just send me an email, give me a call. Now, the College of St. Benedict faculty, staff, support staff, Mary Hinton will pick up the tab for you to attend the school. St. John's University, St. John's Prep, I think what you should do is contact Brother David Paul, Michael Hemeseth, and your new principal at the prep school. And if you have any problems with any of them, give me a call. I'll pursue them. Take care.